It is a beautiful, idyllic New England morning right here in the city of Springfield, the majestic Forest Park, of which Patrick Sullivan and his crew do a tremendous job. Let's give them a big round of applause. And right here in the Remembrance Garden, the first in the United States of America, honoring the sacrifices of Ireland and our Irish American. Right now, I'd like to bring up, for the invocation, Sister Kathleen Keating, the past president of the Elms College and past president of our beloved Sisters of St. Joseph's. Sister Kathleen Keating.
Good morning. O loving and gracious God, we come here today to ask your blessing on us as we commemorate the 40th anniversary of the deaths of the hunger strikers of Ireland. Remember especially the 10 young men who in 1981 surrendered their lives at HM Prison Maze at Long Kesh, not far from Belfast. We know that their ultimate sacrifice grew out of the desperate prison conditions imposed upon them by the British government. Yet their goals, their visions were much broader because they were motivated by the same dream of those who had come before them and come after them. Those who for centuries sustained the struggle for a free, independent, and just Ireland. We thank you, O God, because their actions not only brought about improvements in the prison, but they helped to change the course of Irish history. So we take heart in honoring those who gave their lives so that their families and communities could live with less fear and repression in a more equitable society. We, in the Irish diaspora, find that recalling this monumental historical event is extremely important so as not to lose our vital connection to that history and its meaning to our lives. Many of our own forebears carried the scars of suffering in the struggle for Irish freedom. May this sad page in our story, O God, help us to develop the courage and persistence of the strikers to stand up to injustice wherever we find it and in whatever way we can to help our brothers and sisters here and throughout the world. In conclusion, let us remember those 10 men whose faces here are shown on the banners in the order in which they died. We remember Bobby Sands, their leader, who died May 5th, 1981. Francis Hughes, Raymond McCreesh, Patsy O'Hara, Joe McDonald, Martin Herson, Kevin Lynch, Kieran Doherty, Thomas McElwee, and Michael Devine, who died August 20th, 1981. May their souls rest in peace.
Thank you, Sister Keating, so much for those words and prayer. Now to the Irish National Anthem. James McCardle will sing a soldier's song.
Soldiers are we, whose lives are pledged to Ireland. Some have come shall shelter the despot or the slave. Tonight we land the burn of whale in Erin's cause of war. Mid cannons roar and rifles peal, we will chant a soldier's song.
Now to sing our American national anthem, Dee Riley will sing the Star-Spangled Banner. And Dee, we're so happy to have you here again, and you're such an entertainer. And again, to your dad, Leo, please give my best. Dee Riley.
Oh, sing, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof to the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Great job, Dee. Thank you so much. And again, I welcome you, Congressman Neal, Chairman Neal, or as we affectionately and respectfully call him, Richie. To Pat Sheehan, please be seated. To Pat Sheehan, we're very honored to have you here today. To Sister Keating, to all the honored guests on the dais. I was speaking to Mr. Sheehan early on this morning, and many a times in the media you will hear the word hero, you will hear the word sacrifice, you will hear all these accolades going many a times to our athletes or other individuals. And I thought of when, after speaking with Mr. Sheehan, Patrick, on the sacrifices that he made to stop the injustice that was occurring in Ireland, for human rights, the ultimate sacrifices that Bobby Sands and the other hunger strikers paid, not for themselves, but for the betterment of others in Ireland. And 40 years have passed, but that legacy continues about what is right and what is just and what is shown in compassion of others. And today I stand before you. I'm honored and privileged to be in this gardens of remembrance and to mark the 40th anniversary, so we shall always never forget and always remember what these young men sacrificed for the betterment of others. And the last thing, after speaking with Mr. Sheehan, is that he spoke of, I asked how his passage was here to America. And he said, I thought it was good. He said, I thought I might have a problem with immigration coming over. And I said, I don't think you have to worry about that. You have a dear, dear friend here, and a powerful congressman and friend of Ireland for many, many years, Congressman Richie Neal, and President Joe Biden, to make sure that your travel to Springfield will be safe and sound. And we are so honored to have you here today. Let's give him a big round of applause. One can only imagine the ordeals that he went through and the ultimate sacrifices his brothers in arms put forth. And with that, let's really give a warm welcome. Greetings from Ireland, Patrick Sheehan, Irish Sinn Féin politician, former hunger striker, Patrick Sheehan.
Thank you all very much. And first of all, I want to thank Richie Neal for inviting me to this event today in this absolutely beautiful setting. If it wasn't for Richie, I wouldn't be here today, because it isn't easy for people like myself who have been involved in the struggle back home to get into the United States. But Richie pulled out all the stops, and I'm very grateful to him for that. I suppose I just want to reflect back on the hunger strike for a few moments here this morning. And it's important to remember what the criminalisation process was about, because the British government didn't think they were criminals. If anyone knew we weren't, it was they. But what they wanted to do was to isolate and marginalise Republicans and to detach them from the communities within which they operated. And they hoped that that would demoralise people involved in the struggle, and that they could then move in and ultimately defeat the resistance and defeat the IRA. And that was the rationale behind criminalisation. So on the 3rd of October, Saturday the 3rd of October 1981, 40 years ago this month, I began what would have been my 55th day on hunger strike. By that stage, I weighed about between 100, 105 pounds. I was almost totally blind, yellow with jaundice, constantly vomiting up green bile, and very, very weak. I had been examined on the Wednesday of that week by an external doctor from one of the hospitals in Belfast, and he told me my liver was enlarged and was beginning to shut down. And he said to me that even if I ended my hunger strike there and then, he couldn't guarantee that I would survive. Now, how did that affect me? To be honest, it just went over my head. When you go on hunger strike, you have to have absolute tunnel vision. And it doesn't matter whether it's good news or bad news. You erect a shield around yourself and deflect whatever it is, because the British were past masters at creating an illusion of movement, pretending there was going to be a resolution, and then at the last minute, dashing people's hopes. So in a sense, going on hunger strike is straightforward. You have one job to do, is to stay on hunger strike until you get your demands or until you're ordered off it. And that's what I was doing. And funny enough, one of the probably scariest moments I had in the context of the hunger strike was when I received a communication from the leadership of the Irish Republican Army on the outside to inform me that I would be joining the hunger strike. And it was a small communication smuggled into the prison, 2 cigarette papers stuck together, wrapped in plastic cling film. And I knew what was in this column before I opened it, and my heart was probably in my mouth at the time. And when I opened it, it was addressed to volunteer Pat Sheehan. And that was the first time I had ever seen volunteer in front of my name. And I had always been, and still am, proud to have been a volunteer in the Irish Republican Army. And my heart almost swelled with pride when I saw volunteer in front of my name. Although when I reflected on it later, I thought that the only time you usually see volunteer in front of someone's name is in the obituary columns or on the headstones in a graveyard. But the column went on to say, you have volunteered to go on hunger strike and have been selected to replace volunteer Kieran Doherty. By embarking on this course of action, you will be bringing the movement into direct confrontation with the enemy. So if you have any second thoughts, stand aside now and nothing less will be thought of you. However, if you decide to go ahead, you will be dead in 2 months. No ifs, buts or maybes. It was as stark as that, and I have to say, when I saw it in black and white in front of me, it rocked me back on my heels. And I had to sort of pull myself together and ensure that I was ready to do whatever I had to do. And as fate would have it, on the Friday night, the 2nd of October, Brendan McFarland, who was our officer in command who had taken over from Bobby Sands, came to visit me in the hospital and told me that the decision had been taken to end the hunger strike, and we were proposing to end it the following day at 3 p.m. And Brendan asked me, would I be okay to see it through until then? And I told him what the consultant had said, and he said, well, if you want to come off the hunger strike now, there's no bother, don't worry, nobody will say anything about it. And I said, listen, I'm on hunger strike until this ends, and it's as straightforward as that. And that's what happened. At 3 p.m. on Saturday the 3rd of October, all of us who were left on hunger strike gathered in my prison cell in the prison hospital. I called in the chief medical officer and informed him that we were terminating the hunger strike. And thus ended 7 months of one of the most epic, momentous and defining moments in Irish history over the last 100 years. And even within that context, there was one other event that was as equally groundbreaking, and that was in April 1981 when Bobby Sands stood in a by-election in Fermanagh in South Tyrone. And Maggie Thatcher had said, the prisoners have no support and the IRA has no support. And here was Bobby Sands, a prisoner and an IRA volunteer, standing for election. And we knew we had support because the people kept our weapons in their houses, they fed us, they billeted us, they lent us their cars. We couldn't have operated without them. But that support had never been quantified in any election because we didn't stand in elections in those days. And we had a radio smuggled into the wing on the day of the result, and we had all been warned beforehand that there was to be no noise or commotion when the result was announced, irrespective of what it was. And around tea time that day, in my wing, Pat Coyle read out the result. And there was a bit of theatrics involved. He read out, first of all, the vote for the Unionist, 29,000, whatever it was. And then Bobby Sands, 30,000. And I mean, I leapt in the air and punched the air in silence, and everybody in the wing must have been doing the same. And it's hard to believe that one of the happiest days in your life could be spent in prison, but that was one of the happiest days of my life, because the people of Fermanagh and South Tyrone had come out in their thousands and had validated and vindicated everything we had been doing for the previous 5 years. And it blew completely out of the water Thatcher's assertion that we had no support. And that was the single biggest news story on this planet back in 1981, in the days before social media, 24-hour news. That was the big story. And after that, Sinn Féin began contesting elections right through the 1980s and 90s and went from strength to strength. And so the intent of the criminalisation policy to isolate and marginalise actually had the opposite effect, because thousands of young people were inspired to become involved in the struggle. And we went from strength to strength, and the Brits finally realised that if there was going to be an end to the conflict in Ireland, they had to negotiate with us. And out of that came the Good Friday Agreement. And it's thanks to the people who became involved in the struggle, but it's also thanks to Irish America. If Irish America hadn't become involved and people like Richie Neal, there would never have been a Good Friday Agreement. And the people in Ireland owe a debt of gratitude, an eternal debt of gratitude to Irish America. But the struggle isn't over yet, and we're still calling on you for support. There are more Republicans on the island of Ireland now than there have ever been. And we are within touching distance of the goal for which the 10 men in the H-blocks died in 1981. And we need to push it over the line. And just before I finish, I just want to tell you a story that happened a couple of months ago. I was involved in doing a video message for Oakland GAA Club in New York, and I was doing it at the Republican plot in Milltown Cemetery in Belfast. That's where all our patriot dead from Belfast are buried, and among them 3 hunger strikers, Bobby Sands, Kieran Doherty, and Joe McDonnell. And I had my 2 young daughters with me, Bamba and Fola, who are 9 and 5. And they were quite patient to begin with. They were sitting with me on the wall that surrounds the graves. But then there were technical difficulties, and the cameraman wanted to do different cut-off shots and so on. And of course, they became bored. And they went running around the headstones, laughing and chasing each other. And the first thing that came to my mind was Bobby Sands' quote, "Our revenge will be the laughter of our children." But it also reminded me of the enormity of the sacrifice that the hunger strikers made. Because while I was there with my 2 young daughters, Bobby Sands had an 8-year-old son. Joe McDonnell had children, as had Mickey Devine, and they gave up the chance to see those children growing up. And the other hunger strikers never had a chance to have a family and to have children. And to me, that was the enormity of what they did. They gave their lives for all of us in Ireland, the people of Ireland, for the greater good, that we would live in a better, more just and fair society. So, as I say, the struggle isn't done yet. It's not over, but we are within touching distance of a new independent Irish Republic. We need Irish America to help us to win that republic. Let's go and do it. Gur míle maith agah.
Mr. Sheehan, that was tremendous. You exemplify courage, compassion, determination. And we're honored again to have you here in the city of Springfield, Massachusetts. Another individual who, even though he's a powerful congressman, chairman of Ways and Means, has never forgotten, once a mayor, always the heart of a mayor, has never forgotten his roots of the city of Springfield and his district, but has never forgotten his Irish roots. He has fought ferociously for the men and women of Ireland to make sure that they are treated in a respectful and just way. And you heard from Patrick Sheehan that Congressman Neal continues those efforts. A friend of all of ours, a friend of Springfield, a friend of the country, a friend of Ireland. Put your hands together for Congressman Richie Neal.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, very much. And thanks for your steady hand, solid leadership as you've guided us through some very, very difficult times, and indeed we're grateful for it. I also want to acknowledge Pat Sullivan for the beauty of what Springfield parks look like again. I didn't exactly do a nationwide search when I hired him as mayor. I also want to thank Sister Kathleen Keating and the Sisters of St. Joseph. In the very grim moments, many of you will recall, before the run-up to the Good Friday Agreement, there weren't many venues where you could ask Jerry Adams or Martin McGuinness to speak. And the Sisters of St. Joseph and the Elms College stood up for free speech, and they welcomed them to the campus. And the crowds were enormous. So, Sister, thank you very much for your courage. As a very young man, maybe in my late teens, the John Boyle O'Reilly Club used to do a great job of commemorating the rebellion on Easter Sunday evening. And one of the speakers frequently on that occasion was Bob Fitzgerald's dad. I think he played the squeeze box. Yes, he did. How do you like that? And Jim Lydon and I would go to the John Boyle on Sunday night, and I was caught up in these speeches, fiery speeches, from people like Bob's dad, who had participated in the rising, and what the city of Springfield and Holyoke and other communities had given to the cause. Many of them still wanted, and I was pointing out to Pat Sheehan, there's a couple of you in the audience, I think, that are still wanted. But it certainly galvanized our opinion here, and I was in. And during the hunger strikes, you can recall here the way the American news media treated those events. Every night, a casket was brought to the door in Belfast, and British soldiers turned the casket around because they carried a tricolor on them, and they said they would not allow a military funeral. The crowds kept getting bigger and bigger in support of what was happening. And in many of our ballads, in many of our remembrances, our culture, it's oftentimes misty eyes in which we will talk about the honor of dying for Ireland. Pat Sheehan and the others, they made it possible to turn the page to say, now there's a reason to live for Ireland because of their heroism and their courage and what they did. But in the run-up to the Good Friday Agreement, which is a template for the world, in the run-up to the Good Friday Agreement, it's important to remember it was the courage of Bill Clinton, who stood up to his own State Department and granted a visa to Jerry Adams. That was an extraordinary moment. I defended the Clinton administration that night on what is known as News Night in the UK. The Clinton administration asked me to, and Bill Tranghese, who was so helpful today with this event, he will tell you it was the worst hate mail we ever received for the half hour that we defended what Clinton was doing. I call attention to that because there were a series of events that led to the Good Friday Agreement. But in those events, America played a big role. And as that visa was granted in its aftermath, there was still 8 years from the time the visa was granted until the Good Friday Agreement was secured. American foreign policy is always the reflection in some measure of domestic policy. You have an opportunity to petition your government on behalf of a cause. It's guaranteed by our Constitution. And people like yourselves did precisely that. And Bill Clinton took the message and carried it. When we met him early on, I don't think he ever thought he'd see us again. And there were probably 30 of us in Congress that really stayed after it, day after day, until the Good Friday Agreement came about. So the significance of that agreement is the following, however. Everybody gave up something to get to the Good Friday Agreement. And in the Good Friday Agreement, the Republic of Ireland gave up Articles 2 and 3 of its Constitution, which laid claims to the 6 counties where one of my grandmothers is from, County Down. At the same time, the UK gave up the border, separating the Republic of Ireland from the north of Ireland. So just a few years ago, to show you the difference, I was on a bus with Speaker Tom Foley, and we were crossing from Donegal to Derry. And with the Speaker of the House on the bus, British soldiers stopped the bus, and with night vision and heavy arms, they searched the bus with the Speaker of the House on it. Today, if you cross from Donegal to Derry, your phone pings because of the Good Friday Agreement. That's it. There can be no threat to the reestablishment of a border on the island of Ireland. Period. What's important for all of us to remember is it is a matter of faith in Article 2 of the Good Friday Agreement, which we agreed to, and that was Belfast, Dublin. Those of us who favor the unification of the Republic of Ireland with the North of Ireland, we have pursued that agreement based on Article 2. So just 3 weeks ago, because of you, who have given me this chance to participate in all of these it will never happen moments, I had a chance once again, with the encouragement of Speaker Pelosi, a great friend of Ireland, to question another British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. This means 5. And I reminded him of that during the conversation. And respectful in tone, but sturdy in stance. I said, Mr. Prime Minister, do you recall what this was like 30 years ago? Because there's a bit of a cavalier attitude that has developed about the Good Friday Agreement with the UK. It didn't just happen. But I said, do you remember what it was like 30 years ago? There were 30,000 British soldiers in an area the size of the state of Connecticut in the 6 counties. You couldn't travel anywhere without the RUC monitoring your behavior, your travel, asking you endless questions about where you were going. The watchtowers dominated lives and secret conversations were monitored. It was a police state. Today, British soldiers are gone. The RUC has been reconstituted. The police service of Northern Ireland. Today, people freely get about, and this is where you should take great satisfaction. 2 generations of children in those 6 counties have now grown up without the violence that hectored the North for all of those decades, and some would say and insist on centuries. But the task is not done. I also said to Boris Johnson, as he was profusely thanking me for all of this, I reminded him that part of this agreement that we made, the Republic of Ireland and the UK asked those of us in Springfield, in San Francisco, in Chicago, in New York, and Boston to help stop the gun running. And we did. Only if they would commit to a peace process where men and women of goodwill can find a common path forward. Today there's a government in Stormont, there are free elections, and people have a chance to participate in the more mundane tasks of governing. And we are on the road to what we've all always wanted, and that is a place where community means 2 traditions, not 2 communities. 2 traditions living in what we hope will be the Republic of Ireland. Thank you from the United States of America.
Thank you, Congressman Neal, and you're always very prolific, historic perspective on this occasion. We will now have the placing of the wreath, and we will have our proud Police Commissioner Cheryl Claproot, Robert Fitzgerald, Joan Fitzgerald Lundy, and Liam Smith, please. now going to have the reading of the Irish Proclamation. Professor Caroline Murray, J.D., Associate Professor of Legal Studies of the Elms College, and I'm proud to say that my oldest daughter, Cassandra Sarno, is a proud graduate of Our Lady of the Elms, Professor and Sister Kathleen. So, put your hands together for Professor Kathleen Murray.
Good morning, everyone. Before I begin, and it's always an honor for me to read this proclamation, I just want to acknowledge my stepfather, Billy Kelly. He's our very own Billy Kelly. As most of you know, Billy did his part for fighting for freedom in Ireland, and he personally knew some of the hunger strikers that we are celebrating and honoring today. I also have to acknowledge my small but mighty mother, Sheila Bridget Kelly. She'd never let me live it down if I didn't. Who happens to hail from a very long line of fierce Dublin women that fought through the centuries for justice and equality. And finally, I have to reach out to the Sisters of St. Joseph and thank you once again for having the difficult task of teaching all these rebellious Irish American children, and we turned out okay, and I want you to know that I truly appreciate everything you've done for us. Okay, here we go. The Proclamation of the Provisional Government of the Irish Republic to the people of Ireland. Irish men and Irish women, in the name of God and of the dead generations from which she receives her old tradition of nationhood, Ireland, through us, summons her children to her flag and strikes for her freedom. Having organized and trained her manhood through secret revolutionary organization, the Irish Republican Brotherhood, and through her open military organizations, the Irish Volunteers and the Irish Citizen Army, having patiently perfected her discipline, having resolutely waited for the right moment to reveal itself, she now seizes that moment, and supported by her exiled children in America and by gallant allies in Europe, but relying in first on her own strength, she strikes in full confidence of victory. We declare the right of the people of Ireland to the ownership of Ireland and to the unfettered control of Irish destinies, to be sovereign and indefeasible. The long usurpation of the right by a foreign people and government has not extinguished that right, nor can it ever be extinguished except by the destruction of the Irish people. In every generation, the Irish people have asserted their right to national freedom and sovereignty. 6 times during the past 300 years, they have asserted it in arms. Standing on that fundamental right, and again, asserting it in arms in the face of the world, we hereby proclaim the Irish Republic as a sovereign, independent state. And we pledge our lives and the lives of our comrades in arms to the cause of its freedom, of its welfare, and of its exaltation among the nations. The Irish Republic is entitled to and hereby claims the allegiance of every Irish man and Irish woman. The Republic guarantees religious and civil liberty, equal rights, and equal opportunities of all its citizens, and declares its resolve to pursue the happiness and prosperity of the whole nation and of all its parts, cherishing all the children of the nation equally, and oblivious of the differences carefully fostered by an alien government, which have divided a minority in the past. Until our arms have brought the opportune moment for the establishment of a permanent national government, representative of the whole people of Ireland and elected by the suffrages of all her men and women, the provision government hereby constituted will administer the civil and military affairs of the Republic in trust for the people. We place the cause of the Irish Republic under the protection of the Most High God, whose blessing we invoke upon our arms, and we pray that no one who serves that cause will dishonor it by cowardice, inhumanity, or rapine. In this supreme hour, the Irish nation must, by its valor and discipline, and by the readiness of its children to sacrifice themselves for the common good, prove itself worthy of the august destiny which it is called. Signed on behalf of the Provisional Government, Thomas J. Clark, Sean McDermott, Thomas McDonough, P.H. Pierce, Emmett Kent, James Connolly, and Joseph Plunkett.
Before we hear from the glorious and powerful voice of the entertainer, Dee Riley, we have a special presentation that Liam Smith and Patrick Sheehan are going to make to another good Patrick. Patrick Sullivan, the Wizard of Oz. Where are you? Come on up here. Come on up here, Patrick.
I just want to mark this occasion by presenting this hurley to Pat today.
Well, thank you so much. This is quite an honor. I did not expect this, and I think I'm so proud right now because I think of my grandparents who came over here and never really understood the struggles that they had. But I remember my grandmother, Catherine Fitzgerald, her biggest fear that Ireland would be forgotten. I think by doing this today, we've served her well. Ireland will never be forgotten. Thank you.
We have another surprise, and it's not me singing either. A little levity there, huh? Patrick Sheehan has another special presentation for our friend and our Congressman, Richie Neal. Mr. Sheehan?
Thank you. I just want to make this small, very small presentation to Richie as a token of our gratitude for all his friendship and support down through the years. This is a book that has just been published this year. It's writings by comrades of the men who died on hunger strike, the 10 in Long Kesh in 1981, and Michael Gaughan and Frank Stagg, who died in English prisons in the 1970s as well. So I'd like to present this now to Richie.
If I don't put my cheaters on, I'll be playing the trombone, so. Not the squeeze box, okay, Fitzy? Now, closing music selection, and from the great entertainer, Dee Riley will sing 4 Green Fields. Dee Riley.
What did I have? Said the fine old woman. What did I have? This proud old woman did say I had 4 green fields. Each one was a jewel, but strangers came, tried to take them from me. I had 5 strong sons. They fought to save my jewels. They fought and they died, and that was my grief, said she. Long time ago, said the fine old woman. Long time ago, this proud old woman did say there was war and death, plundering and pillage. My children starved by mountain, valley, and sea, and their wailing cries, they shook the very field ran red with their blood, said she. What have I now? Said the fine old woman. What have I now? This proud old woman did say, I have 4 green fields. One of them's in bondage in strangers' hands. Oh, they tried to take it from me, but my sons have sons as brave as were their fathers, and my 4th green field will bloom once again, said she. Yes, my 4th green field will bloom once again, said she.
Great job. Thank you so much. If we could all please rise for the retiring of the colors. And I'd like to say again to each and every one of you, thank you for being here on this solemn occasion. And good health to you and your families. God bless America. God bless our Springfield. God bless Mr. Patrick Sheehan. And may God rest the souls of the hunger strikers. God bless you all. The retiring of the colors.